What's going on, everybody? C4 here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 wide receivers in college football to one of two things. One is to maybe get some more people to watch some college football. I mentioned some of these names on a Saturday. If you're bored, you may see Indiana going up against Notre Dame. You'll be like, I don't want to watch that game. But because we talk about two players, like, well, man, my team needs a wide receiver. Let's see what the hype is about. Let's see if we can get excited about a prospect before draft season is upon us. And number two is I really want to set a base. I'm recording this as of week 5, so by the time you guys probably see it, week 6 would have been done. So the stat lines might not exactly add up as is, but it's about the halfway point of the college football season. So I want to have a starting point to reference once draft season really does pick up here on the channel. If you guys were with me last year, we went off. We went hard in the draft. So rather than when I have to look at referencing and seeing where guys were, kind of regarded as beginning of the season from other people's work, this way here we can kind of come back and reference and source ourselves and see how our opinions have changed on some players. So without further ado, at number 10, we're going with Auden Tate from Florida State. It rhymes. Not necessarily a lock to declare. I think he probably will. Just to get out of there with the hype. I don't know where Florida State's finding these guys. These Kelvin Benjamin types. Auden Tate, 6'5", 225 pounds on the year. He has 13 catches, 226 yards, and 3 touchdowns. His stat line was never going to be great because with DeAndre Francois going down, I don't even know who their quarterback is right now. Isn't their quarterback like friggin' Kevin Durant? Like, he hasn't worked legs in his life. He's like 6'6", 110 pounds. Built like half the YouTubers on here. But yeah, Tate is a big body wide receiver. Don't necessarily know if he will test well, but then again, Kelvin Benjamin didn't test particularly well at the combine, and still teams are going to fall in love with his size. I wouldn't put it past the Panthers are drafting him. Panthers are like, nah, why not? We're going to run 4 wides. We're going to go with Kelvin Benjamin, who's 6'5", like 235. We're going to go with Devin Funchess, who's 6'4", 225. And we'll get Auden Tate, who's 6'5", 225. Just something crazy like that. Why not? And then you have Curtis Samuel kind of sprinkled in there for some gimmicky runs. I don't necessarily know. But for big-bodied wide receivers and red zone threats, Tate is one of the top guys in the nation. If he does declare, which I'm going to say probably 80-20 that he will declare, I think he'll probably go somewhere between rounds 3 and 5, just because I don't think he's going to test particularly well to get up in the upper echelon, but he's still pretty damn good. Going to number 9, it's going to be Christian Kirk from Texas A&M. I have him a lot lower than some people, just because I've seen probably him play about 5-6 games over the last 2 years, and I have not seen one impressive performance. He's 5'11", he's 200 pounds on the year right now. He has 23 catches for 264 yards and 4 touchdowns. Again, he's kind of not a gadget player, but he's he probably will test particularly well. Not the biggest type guy, kind of built like an Odell Beckham, if you will. It's just he has been hyped for so long, and his stat lines. 2015, he had 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. 2016, 900 yards, 9 touchdowns. It's just the production's not there, and he's kind of one of those guys that does beat up on smaller schools, doesn't show up in the big games. I mean, this year, I watched the game against Arkansas, which was an overtime win, I believe. He looked good. He was their go-to guy. Had a big 81-yard touchdown, which was nice to see, which definitely, I mean, I was going to be honest, I might have left him off this list if that didn't happen. But he probably will test particularly well, and teams will look at his upside rather than his, ultimate production. And it is, let's be honest, it is hard to get 1,000 yards in the SEC going up against top defenses every week. This week that I'm recording this, maybe he had a big game against Alabama. They're getting ready to take on Alabama on the 7th of October, so maybe Kirk had a 300-yard performance against Bama, and then this pretty much will shatter my rankings. But as it stands right now, I think Christian Kirk probably will go between the 2nd and the 4th rounds. Going to number 8, it's going to be Dante Pettis from the University of Washington, 6'1", 195 pounds on the year. He has 27 catches for 368 yards and 6 touchdowns. With Pettis, you also get some pretty good return ability. As far as elite wide receivers that play special teams, he's probably near the top of that list right now. And looking at guys that I'm going to talk about, I don't think there's anyone else that really comes close to his special team ability. So that is an added factor. I mean, you never really want to draft a wide receiver high that throw him in there at special teams right away. But I definitely think he does make plays. He should test very well. 6 foot, like I said, 195 pounds, so not the biggest bodied guy that he's 6'1", a little thinner, but still, man, get this guy out in space. He's good. I mean, look at 2016. He had 53 catches, 822 yards, and 15 touchdowns in a pretty lethal pairing with John Ross. And a lot of times when I was looking at John Ross's tape, Dante Pettis was the guy that was really standing out. So I do think he's getting slept on just a little bit and definitely be a guy that I'd be interested in if I'm looking at this from a Philadelphia Eagles standpoint for a later round pick. I think he'll probably go somewhere between rounds 3 and 5, depending on how well he tests. Like, he's not going to run John Ross speed, but you know, he could be high 4.3s potentially, probably in the 4.4 range. And I do feel that this could be, what was it, 2 years ago? 2 years ago, the 40-yard dash times for the wide receivers were not very good at all. So I can see a guy like Dante Pettis. What was it? It was the year Will Fuller came out. The year Will Fuller and Corey Coleman. Those literally were the only two guys that ran impressive 40 times and kind of got, you know, put ahead of the Laquan Treadwells and types because they had the speed. I could see that potentially here being the case for a Dante Pettis to jump ahead of some guys that might have a better pedigree, maybe a little bit better, you know, route tree and hands because he has that speed ability. So big fan of him. Definitely, you know, could rise from my number 8. Probably wouldn't expect it, and he should get drafted in that 3 to 5 range. Going on to number 7 is a guy that I'm going to give a pro comp here. I watched his game against Ohio State, and he looked identical to my favorite wide receiver in the NFL, who you know is Mr. Mike Evans. And that's going to be Simmie Cobbs Jr. from Indiana. He's 6'4", he's 220 pounds. On the year, he has 23 catches for 272 yards and 3 touchdowns. But more importantly, that game against Ohio State where they lost 49-21, he was a monster. He had 11 catches, 150 yards, and a touchdown. Jump ball specialist. The only thing hurting him is I have no idea how he's going to test, to be honest with you. He could be one of those guys, runs like a 4.6, and I'd be like, yeah, I could see that. He's a beast, though. He's a guy, just throw it up. Shades of Mike Evans. Not going to outright compare him to Mike Evans because Mike Evans, again, was dominant. I think Mike Evans made Johnny Manziel. Mike Evans is the reason why Johnny Manziel got the hype that he did personally. That may be a hot take. Ryan Swope was pretty good there at Texas A&M as well. But yeah, man, big fan of Simmie Cobbs so far. I mean, he is slowing down a little bit. His last 3 games have not been, you know, spectacular by any means. Got 2 touchdowns, though, in his last 3 games. Did all right against Penn State in a loss. You kind of have to think about the quarterback. I'm not a big fan of Ragnow, who's throwing to him in the offense that he's on, but I do think Simmie Cobbs has everything that you need in an NFL wide receiver, and I think he will go somewhere between the 2nd and the 4th rounds, depending on how well he tests, but I'm a big fan of Simmie Cobbs. Going to wide receiver number 6, and that's going to be Deon Cain from the University of Clemson. Deon Cain is 6'1", 190 pounds, and on the year he has 13 catches for 206 yards and only 1 touchdown. But, you know, he is a lot better than his stat line kind of shows, but he's always been, you know, lost might be the proper word. There's been a lot of guys there, a lot of guys to feed in Clemson. You have Renfro, who gets a lot of the targets. Last year you had Mike Williams, you had Jordan Leggett. I mean, I really would like to see him have a much better stat line, but he's going to be one of those guys, kind of like when we talked about the quarterbacks. You're going to be going for the upside. You're going to be going for the athlete, the ability, and not so much looking on the stat lines. He does really look like it's easy comp because they wore the same jersey. Kind of reminds me of Sammy Watkins while he was at Clemson. So, you know, when you look at his stat line on the pace that he's about to set, he's probably going to finish about what he has done for his career, probably between 700 and 1,000 receiving yards, maybe 8-9 touchdowns, somewhere like that. So it's not going to really stand up from a box score standpoint to some of the other wide receivers that we're going to talk about. But I think from a talent standpoint, from a wide receiver that you can really mold into a guy that can potentially develop into a wide receiver 1 in the NFL, that's what's going to get him drafted. I think he probably will go somewhere between the 2nd and the 3rd round, depending on how well his 40 time does come back. Going to wide receiver number 5 is a guy that I don't know how to feel. I know it's like one of those things where I say, oh, I love this guy, I love this guy, I love this guy. Kind of like Deon Cain, where I'm not super sold on him yet, and that's Equanimeous St. Brown from Notre Dame. I mean, he's like one of those guys, it doesn't make sense. How is this guy going to stand up? Like, I just can't see at his frame being able to play in the NFL. He's 6'5", 200 pounds. Like, that is a lot of height and not all the weight behind it just to get popped. But he's a freak, man. He's on the year right now. He has 14 catches for 202 yards, 2 touchdowns, but he potentially has low 4.4 speed. So, like, from that standpoint, like, you know, his tape looks better than, like someone similar could be Stephen Hill, when he was coming out of Georgia Tech. He was, Stephen Hill was like 6'4", 220 pounds. He was a little bit bigger, but he ran like a 4.3, something crazy like that. So from that standpoint, from a build standpoint, kind of similar to Stephen Hill, but I definitely think he has a little bit better ability than Stephen Hill did. Looking at his 2016, he had 58 catches for just under 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. You get the red zone threat, that speed ability. And I think he's going to be the polarizing wide receiver in this year's draft class, because no one's going to know. Like, are you going to, from a size standpoint, you don't want to, start thinking DGB, Dorial Green Beckham with him, and you look at him too much. But then you also have to say, what if this guy can add on 10 pounds of muscle or something like that to improve his durability, become a monster for us? So I just think from that standpoint, he could be the guy that takes over the combine. People got to look at this. Is he the next Calvin Johnson, or is he going to be the next DGB or Stephen Hill type? I think because of that spectrum, he should go between potentially the first and the third round. I don't know how to feel with him. We're doing this week 5. Maybe I'll have a better judgment and better feel come the end of the season. But for me, he's the most polarizing wide receiver in this year's draft class. Going to number 4 is going to be the one where C4 sticks his neck out for a guy who I think is getting slept on. I think he could be an absolute stud in the NFL. And when I look at, the Walter Footballs, the Matt Millers of the world, guys that already have, their big boards out and their positional rankings, he's showing up like outside the top 10, fringe top 10 guy. I have him at number 4, and that is Darren Carrington from Utah, formerly on Oregon, got kicked off. So, I mean, you could kind of throw back to some off the field. But, I think he's a monster, man. 6'3", 205 pounds. On the year right now, he has 30 catches for 485 yards and 4 touchdowns. And when I see him play, he really reminds me of Michael Thomas while he's at Ohio State. I wasn't a big fan, particularly of Michael Thomas, but I've opened my eyes after seeing what he was able to do as a rookie with the Saints and Drew Brees. I really do see a lot of similarities between him and Darren Carrington. Carrington's a guy that could certainly improve his draft stock by running well. That'll make kind of the blurbs of why he got kicked off of Oregon, which I can't remember what it was. I don't know, it was like a gun charge, a drug charge, or something like that. Obviously, it wasn't bad enough to send him to like a West Alabama. He was able to just go to another Pac-12 team. He's a monster, man, and he's performed in some pretty good games, man. Had 3 touchdowns against San Jose State, North Dakota. I watched that. I mean, not the biggest names, but he's going out for a team in Utah that doesn't particularly, historically thrown the ball well. Utah has always been a run-first team. Thinking back to like Devontae Booker and stuff like that. He's played really, really well. So I think Carrington, for me, he's the second. He's Darren Carrington the second. I currently have him as my number 4 inside my top 5 wide receivers. Certainly this could get adjusted, but more so because he just jumps off the screen to me like a Michael Thomas type. I think he'll get drafted anywhere between the 2nd and the 5th round, depending on how teams really view his off the field and how well he tests at the combine. But definitely a guy to keep an eye on. Going to wide receiver number 3, it's going to be Courtland Sutton from SMU. 6'4", 215 pounds on the year, 20 catches for 329 yards and 7 touchdowns. Not an outright comp, but I do see a lot of shades of Corey Davis, who was the first wide receiver taken in the 2017 draft from Western Michigan. Obviously, both kind of coming from small-ish schools and having big games and baller performances against weak competition. But he's been a guy over, since 2015, has been performing, been throwing up touchdowns, a red zone monster, tremendous hands. So he's gonna come in like, if he was at a bigger school, there'd be no questions about it. So it's gonna be very much like Corey Davis. You see really good production against small level guys. Are you gonna take the gamble that he's gonna be a beast, or are you gonna really hold that against him? I think that will be the case with Courtland Sutton. But what I see, man, is a bona fide stud at the wide receiver spot. See a guy that could come in, definitely wide receiver 1 ceiling, and not all these wide receivers this year's draft class have that. I see a lot of players that, even a guy that I have ahead of Courtland Sutton, I don't necessarily see him as a starting outside wide receiver, much more than a guy that can kind of play slot, play a little bit outside, but kind of like a guy that does like a jack of all trades, master of none type wide receiver. I see a guy like Courtland Sutton that can develop into a dominant wide receiver 1 on the outside. Not gonna say he's gonna be all pro or anything like that, but in a league right now in the NFL that's lacking superstar potential. If this was Madden, Courtland Sutton would have that superstar potential, I believe. But it's just going to be teams, how are they going to view it, the level of competition. Moving to wide receiver number 2 is going to be Calvin Ridley from the University of Alabama, 6'1", 190 pounds. On the year, he has 24 catches for 322 yards and 2 touchdowns. Big time player, man. A guy that has been producing against SEC level competition. So kind of the inverse of Courtland Sutton. When I see a guy like Courtland Sutton, you kind of have to look at his ability and the athlete itself. But when you can look at someone like Calvin Ridley, you can look at all those things and then look at the defenses that he's going against. He's been playing against players for the last well, I guess if you include this, your last 3 seasons that are going to the NFL caliber players, and he has performed very, very well in Alabama. 2015, 89 catches, 1,000 yards, 7 TDs. 2016, he had 7 touchdowns. This year, on pace to put up that same type of stat line. Not so much an out-and-out guy. My pro comp for Calvin Ridley is a Golden Tate, one of those guys that can play outside, and certainly you don't have to, kind of put him in the box as a strictly slot wide receiver, even though I believe that probably will be his best position. But you can throw him outside. He's 6'1", definitely got a little bit of size to him, but I think he's kind of the guy that you move around, and because he doesn't have maybe the upside of just a pure out wide receiver like Courtland Sutton, that could kind of skew your ratings, skew how you view him. But man, this guy's good. I think he's going to test pretty well. Good speed. I think personally he's a little bit faster than Ardarius Stewart, who got drafted I think in the 3rd or 4th round by the Jets. I think Ridley's good, man. And as much as it pains me to kind of compliment an Alabama Crimson Tide player, Ridley's my number 2 wide receiver, and I don't see him ever slipping out of my top 3. Very safe player to draft if you need a wide receiver for this upcoming 2018 NFL draft, which now leads us to our number 1 wide receiver. Looking ahead at the draft, looking at college football, and that's going to be James Washington, the wide receiver from Oklahoma State. And it kind of feels dirty talking about a wide receiver from Oklahoma State because there's still some dirt and dust from Justin Blackman, but I guess just think about Des Bryant maybe. When you look at James Washington, 6'1", 205 pounds on the year, he has 28 catches for 647 yards and 5 touchdowns. Kind of, when you think back to when I was talking about Dante Pettis, I don't see a whole lot of wide receivers in this year's draft class that are going to run really, really well. James Washington is one of those guys, I could certainly see him running 4.3, 4.4, somewhere in that range. That could make people go like, that production, that speed, decent size, I want him. He's my number 1 guy. He's the mix of everything that we want. Been a producer for pretty much every year that he's been a starter. 2015, 1,000 yards, 10 TDs. 2016, 1,300 yards, 10 TDs. Has the production that you want, even though it is kind of an air raidy offense. They throw the ball out there a lot, and he has had the benefit of having a tremendous quarterback in Mason Rudolph for most of his career. I think personally, when you look at Courtland Sutton aside, Calvin Ridley and James Washington, I think, are the 2 big wide receivers that you need to be talking about. And I think for a guy that you just throw it on the outside, I think James Washington, even though they're kind of close in size, has more traits that you want to see in an outside wide receiver versus a guy like Calvin Ridley. So for the pro comp of James Washington, I'm giving him Amari Cooper when he was coming out of Alabama. And I know things aren't really hot with Amari Cooper right now, with the Raiders dropping a lot of balls, not really showing that upside and potential, which is why the Raiders wanted to draft him so high. But coming out of Alabama, even though I wasn't a big fan of Amari Cooper, I actually shit on him quite a bit. He was good, man. Good rookie season. I see a lot of the same traits in James Washington, and we're not going to compare and make the easy comparison to a Justin Blackman type. So those are my top 10 wide receivers. Looking at some sleepers to keep an eye on, I like Jaleel Scott from New Mexico State. He's 6'6", 215 pounds, very intriguing prospect. Deontay Burnett from USC. You have Jake Winicki from South Dakota State, getting into some Div 2. And then we really have a kind of a question mark over Deebo Samuel from South Carolina, because he picked up a big injury. I think he might miss the remainder of the season. He might be one of those guys that might want to return to college so he can kind of put his best foot forward, his best tape forward before he heads into the NFL. But those are, man, plenty of good wide receiver. I really do like this wide receiver draft class. I think there's plenty of depth. So if you're a team that is wide receiver hungry, these are just some names I recommend you keep an eye on. So that'll do it for me here today, guys. As always, if your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit the subscribe button. You want me to do offensive lineman in the next video, tight ends, a tight end specific video? I don't necessarily know, but let me know in the comment section below what you want to see before we try to move on to the defense. And yeah, smash the like button if you enjoyed. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace out.